Welcome to Halacha in a Year, where we can get to learn all the most relevant halacha through the prism of the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. You are listening to Rabbi Ya'akov Trump. This year is kindly sponsored by the Moshe Group and CA in zechus of Rivka Biela, bas נחמה Shifra, and in honor of Rabbi Trump. We are now learning the halachas of Birkas Hareach. These are halachas that relate to the brachas, the blessings which are said on scent. And there are really a fascinating set of brachas which people are not quite aware of. We're going to look at this from the prism of three concepts. Concept number one is different brachas on scent. Concept number two is mixtures of scent. And number three, contexts of good scent, of good smells. This actually goes back to the Gemara. The Gemara tells us that we have an obligation to do a birkas hanehen. Whenever we benefit from something in this world, we say a blessing, and that's usually when we consume it. We eat it or we drink it. The Gemara says, what about if we smell it? The Gemara says, similarly, a person is obligated for the pasuk in Tehillim, the very last mizmor in all Tehillim 150, it says, Kol haneshama halel ka, all of the soul shall praise Hashem. The Gemara understands that this refers to something which is a spiritual, almost on the meridian between physical and spiritual pleasure, and that is smell. It also obviously relates to the Hebrew word nishima, which means to breathe in. Things that a person will breathe in is what a person is going to say the blessing for as well. And this is a very powerful and beautiful blessing, which most people are not aware of as well. Just to clarify the words, it reminds me of the time when there was a woman who sat next to Winston Churchill when he was drunk, and she turns to him and says, Mr. Churchill, you smell. In which he responded to her, no, madam, you smell, I stink. So it's important to remember that sometimes we call these the brachas on smell. They are not the brachas on smell, they are the brachas on the scent, on the special scent that we smell, just to clarify that language. Let's jump straight into the halachas that relate to this. So first of all, is there a bracha achrona on scent? The answer is no. Why not? Meaning when I eat something, I say a bracha before and after I enjoy it. Why not when it comes to scent? So the reason is because, the Gemara explains, when I finish smelling something, it is like one is completely finished digesting it, and I'm able to smell something delicious afterwards as well. Whereas food has a longer lasting impact and effect. Now, let's go into some of the more specifics about these brachas. If I'm smelling an edible fruit, what is the bracha? So the bracha is Asher Nasan Reach Tov Baperos. Hashem made a good scent in fruit. That's the bracha. What if I'm already here to eat the food and I happen to smell that it smells like a good food? It's a fruit, I'm about to eat it, but it also has a good smell. In that case, no, there will be no bracha, because the main point is eating in that case. The scent is ancillary and would not have its own bracha. It's only when I'm smelling it because I like that smell. What about coffee? So the truth is, if I'm just drinking it, then there's no bracha on coffee. But if I'm going to a place and I want to smell freshly roasted coffee beans, then yes, in that case, there is a bracha, because you're going to smell those coffee beans. And coffee is a bean. Bean is the fruit of the tree, and therefore of the bush. And therefore one would say a bracha of Nasan Reach Tov Bapeiros. This is not true of instant coffee. Just for those who are not aware of the instant coffee process in the making of the coffee, it's already brewed, and then it's either freeze-dried, or it's made into a paste, and then crushed up into those chips which dissolve in the water. It loses its smell through that process. Smell is reinserted into instant coffee to make it smell somewhat like real coffee, but that's not the smell that came from those beans. It's not the direct smell. So there's no bracha on instant coffee, even just for smelling it. What are examples of this? So the Kitzur gives examples: estrog, nutmeg, lemons. These are fruits which have a smell. Now, what happens if if what makes the smell is the wood of the plant? In this case, the bracha is different, and it's borei atzei v'samim, that Hashem created the wood or the bark that is fragrant. Notice that the word is v'samim, not besamim. So it's borei atzei v'samim. There's the wood or the bark which is scented. What are examples? The examples he gives is cinnamon. Cinnamon is the bark of a tree. Myrtle branches, roses, frankincense. These are all bark related. What happens if it is the grass which is giving the scent? So that is borei isvei v'samim. That is where Hashem created the grass, the herbs of v'samim, and the examples, of course, are herbs. Most herbs that smell good are borei isvei v'samim, not atzei. How does one distinguish between the wood and the grass. So it depends if it's perennial or not. If it's something which is remains, and the wood remains, the stem remains, and it grows new leaves, that's borei atzei v'samim, that's wood. If it does not renew every year, it dies, and then you have to regrow it or replants itself, that is borei istei. What if it isn't a plant product? So, for instance, it's an animal product. In that case, you say borei minei v'samim. This is the most general of the brachas. Hashem created the different types of v'samim. What are examples? The example he gives is musk, which is based on an animal product, or dried mushrooms. Mushrooms are not classified as isvei or atzei. Does oil get its own bracha? The answer is no. Oil does not get its own bracha unless it is balsam oil, which is a very huge export product of Israel, certainly in the times of the second Beis Hamikdash, and has a bracha of borei shemen arev. God created sweet oils. What about smelling of flowers? So it depends. First of all, not all plants are fragranced, and they're not sold for that, they're sold for their looks. So one would need to first ascertain if it has a beautiful scent. If it does, the way to do this is to rub one's hand on the plant that one owns, not the one that's just in the store, and smell one's hand. One doesn't say a bracha on second-hand smell, which would be on one's hand. If it does, then one would be able to say the bracha before benefiting from this world. What bracha is said is dependent on what type of fruit it is, or on what type of flower it is. If it is like a rose bush, which remains from year to year, then it's borei atzei. If it's a flower which dies and has to be replanted, that is borei isvei. So, for instance, in the azaleas, cedars, gardenias, honeysuckles, jasmine, juniper, lavender, lilacs, pines, roses, geranium, and spruce, all are borei atzei. Whereas, let's say the daylily, lilies of the valleys, lemongrass, marigolds, mints, sweet alcium, tulips, violets, they would all require a borei isvei. So a person would need to actually differentiate and know what particular types of flowers that one is actually smelling. Now let's talk about mixtures for a second. What happens if I said a bracha on isvei on wood or atzei on grass? I mixed up those two brachas. In that case, one does not fulfill obligation. They are not subsets of each other. It's not like borei pri adama and borei pri ha'etz. These are separate categories that are mutually exclusive, and therefore one bracha will not fulfill itself on the opposite product. What happens if I said minei v'samim on either of them? In that case, it does include it because minei is a very general bracha, types of scent, which will therefore apply to both. What happens if I don't know what bracha I should say? There's no way, I don't know if this is a perennial or not. In that case, one should say minei v'samim, and that is because it's the broadest and will cover all situations. What happens if I said atzei v'samim on fruit? In that case, that one would be de-eved, post facto, be allowed to have used that bracha because a fruit is technically the product of a tree. What about if I smell orange or lemon rind or cloves? So in this case, it's questionable if these are really fruits, so it's better to actually say atzei v'samim, because in that case, that is a product of the tree. What happens if I have a liquid which is fragranced from ingredients which are put into it? So in that case, you would say based on the ingredients. So if the ingredients are grass-based, it would be borei isvei v'samim. If it was based on bark, it would be borei atzei v'samim. If it's a mixture of the two, one would say borei minei v'samim. And that similarly is true if I have a mixture of different spices, including grasses, leaves, and bark. In that case, I would say minei because it covers both. What happens if I have in front of me a bunch of different things? They're not mixed together, but there is a different categories of scent: a fruit, bark, grass, animal-based scents. What do? So you don't say one bracha on all of them if they're not mixed together. You would say the brachas on each of them separately, and it would go in this order. You would say first on the fruit, then on the wood, then on the grass, and then on the animal-based product, in the order that we just did it just a moment ago. Why do we need minei v'samim on Motzei Shabbos? Why is that when you say the bracha on the B'samim on Motzei Shabbos, we always say minei? And the answer is, in Ashkenazic Jewry, it's done because people don't know necessarily what they are saying the bracha on, and it covers even if there's a mixture as well. But technically speaking, and the Sfarim certainly go like this way, is one should find out what one is saying it on. If one only has cinnamon, that's borei atzei v'samim. If one only has herbs, that should be borei isvei v'samim. So a person should actually work out what they're doing and say the correct bracha. The minei is a safe bracha because it covers everything, but it's better to do the more particular bracha if one is able to educate oneself. The third and last concept we're going to look at is the context of a good scent. So a few basic questions is, what if I'm setting up some incense? So usually One says the bracha when one holds the spice or the item in one's right hand, and then says the bracha and then smells it right afterwards. With incense, you can't really hold it in the same way. So once the smoke starts rising, even before one smells it, one can say the bracha as well. What bracha is said? So it depends on what one's burning. If it's wood, then grass or animal products, one would say the bracha related to what one is burning. What if the besamim was lit in the room of the dead? So it used to be the way they would fragrance the room, because they did not have refrigeration. When there would be a deteriorating body, was they put incense there. So in that case, there's no bracha, because, and similarly, if a person would use incense in the bathroom, this would be to chase away a bad smell. This is not a bracha that one would say on that as well. What about scented stores or scented clothes? Do they get a bracha? The answer is no, unless one actually goes up to the incense itself that's doing the scenting and then smells that as well. What about inside an incense store or pharmacy that sells those smell good products? In that case, one would be able to, because that the scent there is intentional, because that's what the store is about. What happens if I go and come multiple times a day to that store? So it depends. If I come and go intentionally, and I know I'm going and coming, and I know I'm coming back in an hour, then only one bracha is sufficient. But if I go and I wasn't thinking of coming back, and then I had to run back, then a new bracha is required if there was a sufficient break. What about second-hand smell? So let's say I held the esrog, and my hand smells nice. Or the container that the besamim were in, would I say a bracha on that? The answer is no, that's second-hand, one would not say on that case. Are there any limitation on smelling scents? The answer is yes. We're not allowed to smell the incense that comes from pagan worship, and men are not allowed to intentionally smell the fragrance, perfume of women other than their wives. They're not supposed to smell because it's not appropriate. What about perfume or cologne in general, in the case that it is appropriate? So it really depends. First of all, if it's made of natural ingredients, then we go down to the same bracha categorization that we just discussed a moment ago. But one would not do it just if it's splashed on the skin, because on the skin it's already secondhand. If one has the bottle, then one would be able to smell it and say the bracha as well. And of course, that means if it's yours or if it's of a spouse, then one would be able to do this. But once it's on a person, then one would not say the bracha. Also, one would not say bracha if it is deodorant, just to stop sweat, to take away a bad smell. We're talking about something which is adding special smell above the removing perspiration. In that case, that's when one could say a bracha on the actual bottle itself. With this, we conclude. Have a wonderful and meaningful day.